There we go.
Alrighty. So this is great. There's a lot more people showed up than I expected. So this is very nice.
I'm wondering how many people are supposed to be coming?
We have a total of 21 on the list, and several were like, I mean, I know Debbie's a trooper at 2 a.m., but others were in this kind of the same boat. So
Yeah.
We'll have a total of 21, well, 23 altogether, if everyone. So, yeah, it's a lot of people, and we'll do a lot of the work through Google Drive or through the, kind of a work document to make things easier. But we were hoping that having some time to interact face to face, allows us to get to know each other a little bit and learn a little bit from each other and talk about some of the important topics that we want to address in this subgroup. So did you want to start with the introductions, Nancy?
Well, we can, just everyone, I guess, introduce themselves. So, okay, I'm Nancy Parish-Plass. I'm head of the Israeli Animal Assisted Psychotherapy Association here in Israel. And I deal only with psychotherapy in my practice. And I guess the beginning of my working in terms of terminology was just because I was so confused looking around the world to see what I could learn. And then, I saw this AAT, oh, good, I look at that and I went, wait, that's not therapy, but this isn't therapy. And wait, I'm confused. And here in Israel, I'm not saying it's totally understood by everyone here. I was in a meeting in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset, a couple of weeks ago. And, there are the people in therapeutic writing say, oh, we're therapists too. And we don't need to have an academic training program. Why can't we do it with a high school education another year and we're therapists? And so, it's not that it's not there, but I think it's more understood than in a lot of places. And so I wrote an article back in 2014 in Hebrew, and I translated it into English and spread it around, saying, try to make order out of chaos. And just sort of everyone to understand and honor and respect what they're doing without trying to pretend they're doing something else, because nothing is more important than anything else. And just if you gotta define what you're doing, and that's my motivation, and then you'll do it better. And it's like, if I see that somebody has a motor problem, I'm not going to start doing therapy because I can do stuff with animals that will help them with their motor problems. I don't understand it. I refer them to an occupational therapist. And I've had occupational therapists refer clients to me because they realize it's an emotional problem. And I think it's, we all got to understand what we know how to do and we don't know what to do, and go from there. So that's my motivation for being here. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing and learning from all the rest of you.
Well, and I'll go. My name is Amy Johnson, and I, like Nancy, have been participating in some of these groups and discussions globally about finding consistency in terminology. And a lot of it comes from when you're trying to go through the literature, exactly as Nancy said, you're like, okay, oh, here's some support for, oh, wait, yeah, that's really a visit, or that's really, and it really sounds like if we don't know what we're doing in terms of how do we expect the rest of the world to understand what we're doing. So I wanted to treat it as a global opportunity to come to an agreement, or at least a uniform terminology. So the project that we had started between Animal Assisted Intervention International and AAI, and as we were working on it, we're like, well, this seems like a perfect opportunity to get this global support. So we were kind of blown away by the 110 people actually responded to that, either to be on a committee. So we had 80 people respond to being on a committee, and another like 20, 30 people who just want to stay involved. And as Nancy mentioned, there will be some people who don't like it. Like they're going to resist this. They want to be, it's very important to them. It's part of their identity to be an animal assisted therapist, even if it's not appropriate, but that's the pushback we're going to get. So again, we thought if we had this huge global presence, I think is huge, And we're all in agreement. We all have this uniformed recommendation for terminology, that it just further supports the academic rigor, the empirical evidence, ensuring that we're doing exactly what we say we're doing. So thank you all for being here. Miyako, you want to go next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Miyako Kinoshita, and I am at Green Chimneys Children's Services in Brewster, New York. So I am in the United States. I'm originally from Japan. I participated in an equine industry and terminology summit a couple of years ago, where like PASS really PASS International led the group of people to come to consensus with the terminology. I think the document published is in a folder, and I really learned a lot through the process. That I get how to set clear boundaries, how to include people who are doing this work in a fair but really clear way, and not really push anybody away, or but everybody to benefit from clear terminology, eventually pay and reimbursement and all that kind of stuff really matter to many people. So I'm hoping that this group is gonna do something that would help everybody. And I really look forward to really great discussions as well.
Thank you. I'll just go through what I could see. Daniela. Oh, you're muted though.
You have to unmute, yeah.
My name is Daniela Plaza-Square, and I'm a research psychologist. I work in autism research, and I'm probably the odd one out right now because I haven't been involving animals in my research. And part of it is the great resistance that people in my research center, at the university, and other places that deal with human psychology still have towards what's perceived as lack of construct validity of animal-assisted interventions. And I am very passionate about involving animals in various practices, and I would like to see whether sorting out some of the confusing terminology and specifying some of the credentialing requirements, and specifically the goals associated with various practices, whether they're general goals or predetermined goals that could be operationalized into outcome measures. If that could help break this resistance that is still present among psychologists and clinicians that are not really interested in human-animal interactions. So basically, that's why I'm here. I do think we're at the point where we really need a lot more clarification in our language.
Thank you. Great point. Okay, we'll go. How about Michael? Michael.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Kaufman. For the last, 17 years, have been the director of the nature-based programs at Green Chimneys in Brewster. I work with Miyako closely together. Prior to that, I was working for several animal welfare organizations, therapeutic riding organizations. I have been involved in at least 4 significant terminology efforts over 30 years, going back to the Delta Society original terminology that was created. I don't think it's rocket science. I think it's actually very simple. And I think what's at the root of it is that some people either don't want to agree to sort of the shared terminology, or they insist on developing their own terminology. Another thing that I'm also very aware of is that English is not the end all and be all language. Every language is equally legitimate. So one thing we need to really think about is that it's not about inventing hard terms, but more concepts that people can then take into Chinese or into French or their own language. If it's really just English, then we still have the problem of people all over the world calling things different things in other languages. So that's a challenge. I don't know how to grapple it, but as Miyako says, one of the more recent efforts was Path International. It's just always good to really be clear. And the one thing I caution us is not to get too into the weeds over individual words, because internally for ourselves, we can get very passionate about should it be this or should it be that? But ultimately to the outside world and the psychologists, that may not matter. What may matter is sort of the bigger term or the bigger terminology. Anyway, lovely to meet everyone.
Thank you. Laura, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Ackerman. I'm in the United States in Colorado. I'm a volunteer for Denver Pet Partners. So we are what's called a community partner organization of the National Pet Partners Organization. I've been a volunteer for the organization for about 8 years. So I think I come to this with a little different point of view than those of you. I think most of you are professionals working in the field. I volunteered with my dog for about 6 years as a team before she passed away. And I've been on the board of directors for the organization for 5 or 6 years. So we have about 120 handlers. We're an all volunteer organization. Even the board of directors are volunteers. We never charge for services. We rely on donations. We have about 120 handlers working primarily with dogs. We do have a few cats, a miniature horse, and up until recently, we had some rabbits. And we just serve such a wide variety of organizations, hospitals, nursing homes, hospice, cancer care centers. We work in physical therapy and occupational therapy with therapists. We do reading programs in schools and libraries. We have some dogs working in the judicial system. They're not allowed in the courtroom, but in pre-trial preparation, they're working with victims and witnesses. We're at colleges during finals week. We don't do crisis response per se, but we have been on the scene after the fact to provide support later. So we really strive to stay up with what's going on in the academic world. We try to use all the proper terminology that's accepted. So we're curious about what comes out of this and what terminology. Also, a big part of what we do is education. We do a lot of speaking events for people, or even just when we're out with our animals. We are always educating people about what we do, and even about the things we don't do. For example, we don't do equine assisted therapy, but if someone asks about that, we like to be knowledgeable and be able to describe that. One of the big things for us has been the use of the term animal assisted intervention, because for us as volunteers, first of all, it's always hard to describe what we do with just a phrase, right? If we say animal assisted therapy, intervention, whatever we use, activity, we then have to further explain to people what it is we do. But the use of the term intervention for us as volunteers sounds a little intense.
Absolutely.
So we are not trained professionals, right? We have all taken the Pet Partners Handler class. We've all passed evaluations with our animals. We do have members who before they retired were nurses and teachers and librarians. And so that carries over to their volunteer work, but generally we're volunteers. So when we say we do animal assisted intervention, it sounds a little dramatic to people. I will say the vast majority of what we do is what we call the more casual things, right? Visiting people in hospitals, nursing homes, places like that. So excuse that noise. So as I said, we're curious to see what comes out of this and to see how the terminology can be best applied to what we do.
Thank you, Laura. How about Esther?
Hi, my name is Esther Delille. I live in Montreal, Canada. I am a political scientist, turned historian, turned animal assisted therapist. Okay, that is my latest career. In 2018, I established the Canadian Institute of Animal Assisted Interventions, which is a nonprofit organization. Why I choose the word intervention is because, as far as I could read, it was the most neutral word. Oberefine used it You know, I know that it can be dramatic. I watched the TV program Interventions, you know, so I know, but, you know, it covered a larger ground than just psychotherapy or therapy as such. And when I talk about people who work in that field, again, in order to find the most neutral, large, but meaningful word, I tend to use the word practitioner. Okay, well, meaning that they have some kind of training. Maybe they have a university degree, maybe not. Okay, you know, one of my colleagues, she works with children in a dentist office, autistic children. Okay, so I think she's a practitioner. She got a certificate in animal-assisted interventions. She's not a therapist, psychotherapist, but what she does is, to my eye, professional. Okay, she knows what she's doing. I wrote about what she's doing. I interviewed her. I interviewed Nancy too, you know. So as Michael said, words can be tricky, you know. If we get too precise, we risk turning into our work into, you know, the theologian, Catholic theology in the Middle Age, they spent years discussing on how many angels could stand on the head of a needle. But for them, it was very important, you know. So we shouldn't get lost into, you know, pinpointing, while at the same time remaining, you know, finding meaningful words, concepts. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Thank you. And then Mariana.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Abed. I'm from Argentina, South America. I have began with equine-assisted interventions in 2017. I was formed with the AAI model here in Argentina, and I also have the opportunity to go to the States and to take part of the conference of AAI in Kentucky, the last one in person. And also I began to develop, I'm a professor at the University of La Plata in Buenos Aires. So as a professor, I developed a course for the students in animal intervention at the College of Veterinary Science. And we do a lot of conference. We have the opportunity to know the work that many groups do here in Argentina with horses, dogs, and also in a park that have in the Buenos Aires province that have a program with wild animals for children of institutions that depend of the government. Do you understand my English? Because it's so difficult for me.
Oh, yes, it's great. Thank you.
Okay. And I agree with Michael that it's perfect to find a concept of the things because, well, we speak in Spanish, so it's different for us, so many words. And for me, it's so difficult to find grants for our research at the university because people still here in Argentina didn't know anything about the interventions. So for me, it's very important to have a very clear words to define things in order to have the support for our research. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then we'll go Debbie at 2 a.m.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for Amy and Nancy for inviting me to join this group. And my name is Debbie. I'm from Hong Kong, and I'm the founder and the service director of Hong Kong Animal Assisted Therapy Association. I came from a social work and psychology trained background. And then our organization mostly work with children and adolescents and mostly on AAT and AAE. one of the reasons that I want to join this working groups is because I think indeed in Hong Kong, the development is still very at the very first stage. People are still figuring out what is AAA. A petting animal is not not therapy. So, but when me and our team working in AAT, and we discovered this is so many variety we can go deep. And then I think the importance of the definitions or clarifications is important that lead to we can provide more specific professionally training for the practitioners. Yes, but I agree with Michael that I think in the past we have more general definitions that we can fit everybody in because it's good for the research. But when the field going more professional, we discover, oh my God, there's so many, even in AAT, we have so many definitions. So I think one of the difficulty I foresee, maybe we will go too specific on the definitions because we have so many different practice here. But I think it's important to find a balance. We can't do too general, but we can't go too specific. If I think this is one of the thoughts in my mind. Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you. Laura.
Me, or is there another?
No, that's you. Hi, Laura.
All right. So my name is Laura Hay. I am in Wisconsin in the United States. And my lifelong career was as an occupational therapist, primarily in rehab. And then I had been a therapy animal handler with Pet Partners back in the 1900s. I started in 1998 as a handler with what was then Delta Society. So about 20 years ago, I earned a certificate in animal assisted interventions. And then I developed Wisconsin's first AAT program. And since then, I've been designing programs in different areas of AAI and then working with all of the players, the volunteer handler, the therapy animals, which are mostly dogs, but I have been involved with a miniature horse and some bunnies. Love to have a rat. So working with the volunteer handlers, the therapy animals, and the professionals to ensure that the interventions are seamless. And then I also teach a course in animal assisted interventions at a local university where we talk about the terminology early in the semester. And as much as I try to keep up on things, you know, there's just a tremendous amount of variability and so on. And we are also in the process of developing our own AAI certificate. So that variability is really striking, and I'm really excited to see some common language emerge in the field. So from our work together.
Excellent. And we'll go, Meg. How about you, Meg?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, sorry, my voice is a little bit croaky. I'm a little bit coldy as well. But nice to be here. Where to start? Okay, so even though it says Stacey Andrew, I'm Meg Kirby, and I'm from Australia, and I've been training at the Equine Psychotherapy Institute. We have a private organisation that does offer postgraduate equivalent training in equine assisted psychotherapy, and we've done a few short courses this 2021 in animal assisted psychotherapy, but going forward we're just starting with our full year animal assisted psychotherapy training program too. I love what everyone's saying. It's just really great to be here. I think I included my document that we use in our EAP and AAP training. The other thing is that I also do train alongside the EAPs, who are the registered professionals, so they have to be allied health professionals. I also do train what we call EAL, equine assisted learning practitioners, that either fall under AAA, AAE or AAC if they're a life coach, a teacher, or without a qualification. Broadly speaking, they fall in the AAA area. So that's just to complicate matters, but that hence why I created that document for our students and our community. I'm in the middle of a training program at the moment for about 30 people, training in equine assisted psychotherapy at my place with our herd of 12. I think the thing that I'm really passionate about is scope of practice. And what I really want to see is a lot more specificity about discipline-based animal-assisted work, so that you'll see in my document that we really clarify the difference between not just the A and the E and the C and the T, but also for us, because we train psychotherapy specifically, which is a humanistic oriented psychotherapy approach, that we're really clear about. Are we talking under AAT and EAT? Are we talking about speech therapy, physiotherapy, psychology, social work, psychotherapy, or counselling? In Australia, the context for you all to know is that counselling and psychotherapy, which is different to the States, is used interchangeably, the terms. And so counsellors are also trained at a diploma level, not just degree master's level. And they can get their level 1 counselling diploma to start as a registered counsellor. Psychotherapists, to be a registered psychotherapist, you have to be postgrad. So you have to have a degree and be a postgraduate level at least. And of course, for psychology, it's 6 years master's level. Social work, it's degree level minimum and master's. So every discipline comes with their own background, but we specifically focus in on psychotherapy. That's what I train. And even my Ls, my learning practitioners, they're trained in a psychotherapy model so that they can keep their clients safe, but they still stay in their learning scope of practice. So we teach them exactly how they keep their clients safe through their skill base, through their counselling and psychotherapy theory and practice skills, and also where they don't go, with family of origin work, with trauma-based work, with what Gestalt might refer to as unfinished business-based work. So they focus in on social and emotional learning, skill building, and some do professional development work like leadership. So yes, my focus is really on scope of practice. It's very focused on discipline and people being very clear, what are you talking about that you're offering? And in Australia, the other important context for you all to know, I'm sure it's worldwide, is that there's a real confusion about assistance animals and assistance dogs. Hence why I create and dog training and horse training, and it all being confused for or misunderstood to be equine assisted psychotherapy or animal assisted psychotherapy. Hence why in my diagram on animal related services, you'll see I put all the other animal related services that people might like to train into in their lifetime along the side, so as not to be confused for a facilitated trainer that is either a professional and what degree or level training they are, or an unprofessional, which usually fits in the AAA area. But to be a coach, we have to have a diploma or degree in Australia. To be a teacher, we have to have a degree. So it's really the AAA section that people, if they have not anything other than our 1-year training program, they might be a mother or a riding coach, but they don't actually have a diploma or a qualification, then they are needing to stick with our scope of practice that is defined as learning practitioner. They're not to use the word therapy. They're definitely not to use the word psychotherapy. And they must be referring to their work very clearly as equine assisted learning, animal assisted learning, or animal assisted activities. And lastly, just for good fun, I'll just let you all know that I work not just with the horses in equine assisted psychotherapy, but we've been doing a lot of work in our room-based work with our dog Bear, who's my little Japanese Spitz. So my clinical work, I do work in my room with Bear and my 2 cats, Fleur and Sabrina. So I do indoor animal assisted psychotherapy and teach indoor as well as outdoor, not just with my horses. I also have a little mob of kangaroos in our sanctuary, our little private sanctuary that just this recently I moved from a private license to a, what's it called? It's called a displayer license, which means that effectively I'm functioning as a wildlife centre. And the work that we do with kangaroos and all animals is with what is not with therapy animals. So we're not interested in training the animal to respond in a particular way. We're interested in the animal being who they are, ensuring safety, of course, but learning from the animal's approach, from their boundaries, from their feelings, from their nervous system, from their behavior, from their social mammal cues, but also most importantly, the relationship that may or may not be developed in the moment, in the session, across sessions over the year, if it's long-term psychotherapy or short-term social and emotional learning. So that's the little extra context that I bring, is that we work with the wildlife. So the definitions do not fit us. That's why we very clearly in my animal related services document defined everything very specifically to help people understand that therapy animals are not what we do, and that from a humanistic, relationally based psychotherapy perspective, to have an obedient animal is the exact opposite of what we teach. We're teaching what we call in psychotherapy I-thou relationship, which is being to being, and the beauty of the work being absolutely that there is a consent across all species. So we work with what I teach is interspecies I-thou relating. So that's enough, that's a lot, but I just wanted to add in my little sweet spots and very keen interests, because in Australia, there are people just confusing somebody getting a grant for an assistance dog with animal assisted psychotherapy, which is something that people, if they're trained with us, they've trained for a year, they're qualified, and they're a social worker or a psychologist, and it's a completely different piece of work. So just bringing in that broader context too. So lovely to be here.
Thank you so much. Just a couple more. We'll go, Bridget.
Yes, my name is Brigitte Wijnen. I am from the Netherlands, although at the moment I'm residing in the Bahamas. But I hope you can see a little bit of the sun behind me. I am in the Bahamas because I want to write my first paper, and then I need some time off. I am active in the field of donkey-assisted activities, interventions, therapy, we will find out. I work with donkeys. I have 12 donkeys, and I am currently studying the motivation of animals in therapy. They enjoy what they are doing. And I hope to receive a doctorate in a few years. So I studied dopamine and brain activity to get more insight into the motivation of the animals we work with. And I also hope to find that the more the animal is enjoying the intervention, better the result could be for the human involved. And if that would prove to be so, then we would, we as handlers and therapists, we would be a little bit obliged to find positive interactions. So I want to focus on positive emotions in the animals, and opposed to the absence of stress, for instance. I have a master in health sciences, but I'm not a therapist. I feel very, very comfortable in being a handler and explaining the therapist how and what to do with the donkey. I feel very comfortable with that. I am in this group because I want to make a strong plea for keeping it as simple as possible. We are not only trying to find a good terminology for ourselves, but also for the public and for stakeholders outside our world. They have to understand us. So if we make it very, very complicated and use tons of definitions and several acronyms, then the outside world would get confused. And I would make a strong plea for keeping it simple. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you.
Excellent. And then I think, is it Abir? I'm not saying it correctly. Oh, maybe she's not here. And we'll just jump to Cindy.
Am I the only Cindy?
Yep.
Okay, here, let me get on video here. Sorry, I've been in the car traveling, but I've been listening. I just tuned in, so I apologize. Hi, everyone. From Madison, Wisconsin. I'm a nurse by trade. Let's see, a little bit by my background. I was in the military nursing for 8 years, so I do work a lot with U.S. veterans and their families. So that's probably my specialty and my background. I got my master's in nursing, which was, so I utilized my Keystone project for animal-assisted therapy. I do realize for my field in particular, nursing therapy doesn't seem to really, it kind of causes a little confusion. So I do try to use the term animal-assisted interventions because I do use nursing interventions in my private practice. So much like other providers, I'm a private nursing practice utilizing nursing theory and implementing right now dogs, my personal dogs, and chickens. And we recently acquired a kill pen horse, 26-year-old mare who's amazing. But I haven't gone with that. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to go into the horse world. My daughter's a horse trainer, so she's been kind of my handler for me. But I love what everyone has. There's something that everybody has said that I've just resonated deeply, especially keeping it simple. I love that. Also, I recently certified as a dog trainer. So I went through all the hours and the testing and the schooling, and I did that because my passion, which I think one of the other members is the animals, the non-human animals point of view. I have seen we have gone too far off, and it's innocent. I believe it's innocent, but I see way too many volunteer therapy dog teams yanking dogs around on leashes. They should be free. I'm really I went through, so I was a little bit more background too. I started off as a volunteer team with Animal Assisted International. But I became a little bit saddened when I started to see how therapy dogs were treated Like I could tell they didn't want to be there, but the handler really wanted to. And so my focus now, or where I'm more when I'm teaching and asked to speak, is really the health and welfare of the animal itself. I feel like they are their own agent, and we need to really protect them. I do feel it's innocent. I'm not pushing any blame, but I guess I'm so passionate about it because I see sometimes so many unhappy animals, and I just know that if maybe given a different day or given a different environment, they would probably flourish along with the client. So that's kind of my stance, but so happy to be here. Thank you, Dr. Amy Johnson. I love what you do with the kids. And I guess my only question to the group is, I'm not sure if, because I came in late, so again, I apologize, everyone, is that I know that the Pet Partners organization, I believe they're coming up with a testing for animal assistance. So I'm not sure if that's covered yet or if we're coming to that. So I don't know how much that is going to apply to what our working group is. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And then I think that's everyone. I missed, okay, I see you. Is that equine assisted? I want to make sure that I'm getting you correctly. Is that? Oh, okay, I've raised the association. So Julia, would you like to introduce yourself? You're on mute. Right, your camera's on, but your audio is you're muted too.
Hi, Amy. Hi, everyone. So glad to be here.
Oh, hi.
We're from Brazil and we work on equine assisted therapies and activities. We do offer courses about, and we here have some misunderstandings and some questions concerning the name, the terminology. I heard Michael saying it's about the same. We need some clarifying here, and at the same time, you need to explain people are not from this area. So here we have a special word called ecoterapia. That means equine therapy. But at the same time, ecoterapia, equine therapy is a so large, so broad area which works therapists and teachers and ride instructor. So it brings some kind of confusion from people who are not from this area. And as I read the white paper, is some so important thing to tell about, to show everyone are not from this area. I heard Meg saying it's about the same. We need some area from psychotherapists. We need some area from occupational therapy and whatever. We need, I read actually the Nina Eckham Fry on Het Congress, and Nina says, the profession is, the graduating says the area. So a psychologist offered psychologist and whatever.
That's very true. So I think that is everyone. Did I miss anyone? Did anyone not get to introduce themselves? All right, so really nice group, nice representation, I think. Nancy, is there anything that you wanted to add? Oops, you're muted. You're muted, Nancy. Hold on. Nancy, you're muted.
Nancy,
There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think there are two things that I was picking up on what people were saying. One is the obvious or not obvious idea that we always have to be aware of the ethical issues. We have to figure out how to enter that into the idea of terminology, but something that we should never forget. it was interesting that some people were going, I guess I'm included, wanting to be more specific in the different definitions. And then there were two people in the group said they would rather not be so specific. I think there's, that has to be talked about. I know, for instance, again, as I said at the very beginning, just to say animal-assisted therapy is a major problem. Because if you're going to, for instance, look at the research, if you have 100 studies about animal-assisted therapy and 100 different research studies where not one study is talking about, the variable, therapy is not the same variable. Everyone's talking about a different therapy. And so therefore it destroys any possibility for doing any serious research in the field and comparing one research study with another research study. Another problem with lacking of specifics, again, this is my point of view, is that somebody is looking for therapy for, say, psychotherapy, that's where I come from, and they go to somebody else who's saying, I give therapy. Well, then how do they know it's the type of therapy that that particular client needs? So you have to, I think, look at the goals for who you're talking to, what type of terminology you're going to be using. And what I understand is that maybe depending on the audience, you might want to explain, the more broader, let's say the umbrella term, animal-assisted therapy would be useful if you're talking with a broader audience and separating that from education. But if you're going to be talking to more specific, let's say academic audiences, or an audience where, the client's looking for therapy, you have to be more specific, because you certainly don't want to send somebody for occupational therapy to a psychotherapist. And you have to say they're different, they're different emphases, and they have to be taken into account. So, okay. That's what I'm seeing right now.
Okay, awesome. And we can have a lot of this discussion. For today, though, if we can kind of isolate like what our specific purpose is of this group. So initially we talked about it being aimed at having transparency in the field and seeking clarity and consistency in terminology. There is another group that is handling like therapy animal, assistance animal, that they're handling that side. So where our group is the animal assisted intervention category. We were asked too if we feel it's appropriate to bring in the human animal interaction side of things. Intervention was a big term. Somebody brought it up as far as that sometimes can be problematic. Because intervention in some areas means something very specific, and in others it's a looser term or an umbrella term. So being able to have that consistency in terminology, consistent definition that we all can, or at least most of us can agree upon, and then sharing this information in like a white paper or some context that we can share. And this will go out from the Ohio AAI work group. So is there anything anyone wants to bring up first? Yeah.
Just very quickly, and I do want to make a point, but I want to ask time frame. What is the time frame of this project that we're working with you with?
Sure. So like we intend to have 3 meetings throughout the year, and we'd like to have the paper ready to go in like the fall. So if we can have like most things written up in the fall is what we're shooting for.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my point picks up on what Meg said, and also what the gentleman who spoke last is. What was his name? It doesn't appear on the screen, does it?
Julia? Am I saying that correctly?
Anyway, the thing we need to also be very aware of, that credentialing internationally is not consistent. Even in the United States, state by state, who can do mental health practice is governed by the state. In some states, you can do psychotherapy with a master's degree, in others you can't. Social workers can do it in some places, in others you can't. Even with animal-assisted education, we can't say certified teachers only, because in many countries there are different types of teacher certifications, or no certifications at all necessarily. So we just need to keep that in mind.
Exactly. We did talk about that in our initial groups, as far as it, because exactly what you said, like animal assisted coaching, or coaching in one area is considered counseling, in another area, like coaching is very, very different than counseling. So being able to isolate that. So we were trying to come up with terms that were like, and it's hard to throw out words like appropriate, but you know, having the credential, licensure, or degree as it, you know, in your area. So how is it region specific degree, credential, or licensure that's required? So that way it kind of does exactly what you're saying. It's not saying that you have to have a social work degree, but you have to have whatever is equivalent in your area. So how do we say that? How do we say that without having to a paragraph long discussion about it? The other thing that we had noticed, Melissa Winkle and I went through, we could find were international definitions of animal assisted interventions, and they're very similar across the board. They had a lot of the same context, you know, having the licensure degree or credential that's appropriate. But the things we found that were missing were, a couple of you brought it up, the animal side of things. Like we couldn't find one that said ensuring that the animal is consenting to participate, or the animal is, you know, the welfare and well-being of the animal is considered. So that was something else that we thought was really important to include in there. I've been taking notes too, just like Nancy. So my hope is that, you know, throughout the year, I think the meeting dates, I have them somewhere, you know, it'll be like winter, spring, and then summer that we'll get to meet together. And then in the meantime, we work on a kind of a working document. If that works for everyone, does that work for all of you?
I'm sorry, I have to leave. So
Okay.
send me an email and I'll do whatever I have to do, okay? But I really have to leave now.
Sure,
okay?
sure, no problem. Thank you for
So
coming.
nice meeting all of you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, nice meeting you. Yeah, and I know that a lot of you are, and you're off hours, and we didn't designate a time for this meeting. So the hope was that we could come up with at the, you know, the introductions were great. That provided a lot of clarity with where you are coming from. So I think was really super helpful. I can write this up, you know, in notes, and you can tweak whatever I missed, but it gives us a good starting point. And then coming up with, you know, an outline of what the white paper will look like. And then Nancy, is there anything else that you can think of that we had talked about that I'm missing? You're muted though.
I have a quick question or a comment while Nancy turns off her microphone. Turn it off. Turn it off, girl. Okay, so I want to know, now that we've introduced ourselves, do we have the right people in our group? In other words, is the balance right between practitioners, therapists, and do we also have enough academics who come more from the scientific world? Because oftentimes where the terminology gets muddy, as Nancy said, is in the literature searches and in the research papers that are published. So I'm just open question.
Yes, sorry, we have occupational, well, how we had it, occupational physical therapists, a few of those, educator, teacher, professor. We have mental health providers, nurses, other healthcare. So I feel like we have a pretty good representation, a variety of countries, as you heard, and different species that we're working with, different modalities that are used. So based on the introductions, I feel like that it is a pretty diverse and broad group. So, and there's, yeah, a few we're not here. There's still a couple that are not, that will be here the next time, but.
Amy, I think that one of the things that in the equine terminology they did is really, you know, look at the stakeholders, you know, and like who really get impacted by that decision. And like, I wonder if we could, have a little bit of a homework to do that in the different areas and see.
Yes. I like that.
I jump in just a little bit because I'm coming from the academic world, and I know how much people who do work with animals are passionate about it. And I think everybody's interest here is to validate the field first, because we're still not at the point where these activities that involve animals are considered at the same level of professionalism as other type of interventions. And my point about terminology is we need a language that speaks meaningfully to the academic people, clinicians who don't work with animals. So we need to use words consistently, because if we call everything that we do with animals an intervention, including a visitation in a hospital, I'm sorry, a psychologist would say an intervention involves a protocol, an implementation of that protocol, and some specified goals and outcome measures. Now, we certainly want to include all the wonderful work that most people who work with animals do, the handlers and so on. But unless there's specific goals at the end of that activity, I'm not sure they should be labeled intervention. Certainly they should not be labeled therapy. So I think the very first point is restrict the word therapy to therapeutic activities and practices, and then education to educational practices. And both therapy and education are clearly activities that are structured, that require protocols and require certain specified goals. All the other activities, which are extremely useful and we need a lot of, are just human-animal interaction programs, activities. So I know it's way too late in history to replace the umbrella term intervention with something like human-animal interaction programs. But if we did that, I think we could come up with just one or two clearly differentiating criteria, and one could be credentialing and type of goals. So my point is to start a meaningful discussion. Instead of looking at specific definitions, could we decide what are the criteria we need to invoke in order to come up with the appropriate definition? And from an academic and research point of view, to my mind, criteria would be goals. And if the goals could be operationalized into outcome measures, and the credentialing of the people who deliver that activity. And then we could have a lot of unstructured or semi-structured or less than, stringent activities that Laura was so beautifully talking about, with all the handlers that need to be trained and their animals need to be trained. But what they provide is psychological support, comfort. They're comfort animals, they're visitation animals, they're wonderfully useful animals, but they're not therapy animals and they're not education animals. So to my mind, is there some way we could just come to the agreement on what criteria should we use in definitions? And I'm saying that from the point of view of someone who's coming from an academic field and not from the practice of human-animal interaction, clinical therapy, whatever.
Laura Hayes had her hand up for quite a long time now.
Yes, I was just going to go back to includes a little bit about what Daniela was saying, but I was going to go back to Amy's earlier email. You had asked Amy if we wanted to include definitions of human-animal interactions and human-animal bond, which have not been uniformly identified from what I can find. And maybe that's a starting point that would then land us into a way to describe or define different animal-assisted interventions, et cetera. And I like Daniela's idea of kind of, either kind of sorting things out by whether they're structured or unstructured, and then AAI kind of does that, AAI versus, and then also credentialing, not just of the human who might be a handler or a, whatever, a professional, but also credentialing of animals. And those things might help us kind of put the different components into the right label, so to speak.
Thank you.
But I do vote to go back to the whole human animal bond thing. Try to get the human animal bond and human animal interventions defined as well as the various AAIs.
Thank you. And Bridget.
Yes, the person that spoke for Laura, I don't remember the name anymore. She said that it's necessary to define what can be called therapy. But I think that is already covered in the white paper of Ohio, where it is stated that you can only call animal-assisted therapy a therapy when there is a therapist involved, which is who has the credentials in the country that he works in, who is working on a program, based on a program, and the program has to be evaluated. So that's clearly, oh, it was Daniela, now I can see it. So that's clearly identified in the white paper of Ohio. And I myself am in the academic world and a practitioner, so I completely understand the academic demands and demands in the field. So for me, again, there is a plea for keeping it simple and not too many acronyms. And another thing is that when we are talking about animal-assisted psychotherapy or animal-assisted education, the last word in this combination of words is referring to the human, not to the animal. So if there is, people speak about animal-assisted psychotherapy, then there is a psychotherapist. Sorry, my Dutch is trying to get in between. So the last word of this three words together, that's the one that is giving information about the therapy involved. So you don't go for animal-assisted psychotherapy with an
Thank you. Laura, go ahead.
I wanted to go back to what Daniela was talking about, because she mentioned what I said earlier about the volunteer aspect, right? So this is such a growing field for volunteers. I think the PEP Partners estimate is that they have 11,000 handlers in the United States. Don't quote me on that. As I said, in Denver alone, we have 120 people, and we have new people interested every year. So this is really a growing field for volunteers. So I think it's very important that we have terminology that talks about what we are doing as volunteers, right? We're trained to handle the animals. The animals are trained and have passed their testing, but in most cases, we're not professionals. We do have professionals in our organization. So, how do you describe what we do? Like I said earlier, intervention sounds dramatic. Therapy doesn't seem right because we're not therapists of any kind. But then we do have handlers who are working with professionals, right? So we have a handler going to work at a long-term care facility, and they're engaging in physical or occupational therapy with the therapist and the animal. And then, we have volunteers working in schools, but it's not always actually an AAE program, right? It's a more informal thing where the handler and the animal are reading with children, but I don't know that they're measuring the children's progress. In some programs they are, and not all of them. So I just want to make sure there's terminology too that really describes what we do, because this is a field that's growing every year, right? And will continue to grow. And as I said, it's really difficult for us to describe what we do. I do fundraising for our organization, and when I come across someone, I actually just really, people have such a short attention span. I say, we go visit people in hospitals, we read with kids, because there's no terminology I can use, and I don't know that we'll ever come to one where in 3 or 5 words, somebody's going to understand what the heck our organization does, right? Unfortunately. Thank you.
Great points. Is there anything anyone else wants to bring up? Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah.
One element that we should at least think about or talk about for PATH International, the American governing therapeutic writing organization, having done a terminology process recently, one of the things we've struggled with for the last 30 years is enforcement. And there has to be ultimately an enforcement of terminology, the sense that a center that advertises in its brochure that they are doing therapy when they have no therapist on staff and they belong to the National Association, there has to be an element of holding them accountable. We are moving towards that. And it's taken a long time. And for IAHIO, that's something to think about down the road. And it's very difficult to do because we don't have the capacity, we don't have the funding, we don't have the staffing. But ultimately, if someone intentionally chooses to misrepresent their activity, we can have the best terminology in the world, but if people cannot use it, then that's a problem.
So I was wondering, when one uses the word enforcement, it sounds it should have some legal implications and so on, but these could be sorted out through publication and rejection of publication. So if we have all the journals or all the materials, including newsletters from organizations and so on, clarify what is the protocol for their activities, what are the defined goals of the activities if they're doing interventions, and what are the people delivering the activities, what kind of professionals they are. If those would be requirements before any kind of material is approved for publication, whether it's on a website or in academic literature, then maybe that would sort of help clarify things. And again, unfortunately, the word intervention is already sort of agreed upon as the umbrella word. I'm not comfortable with that, just as Laura was saying. I think the word activity, because all interventions are some sort of activity, but not all activities are interventions. They're only interventions if they have outcome measures, right? If they have specified goals. So to my mind, the simplest way would have been to say this whole field is animal-assisted activities or human-animal interaction programs. And those could be unstructured or informal activities like the 11,000 handlers that do their work, or structured and intervention type of activities. And then the differentiation that is in the literature there into therapy, education, and special programs like crisis interventions, those I think are already very nicely defined in the various documents that you've already sent. And actually, I was surprised not to see in the document common terminologies the simple sort of structure from the PET partners that was Delta Society before schematics, because I think they already came up with a pretty simple terminology that could fit what we're talking about right now. And it's basically the goals of the activity, who's the population, the credentials of the people delivering it, and the animal credentials, let's say, training, and so on.
I know, Meg, you have something.
Yeah, I was just saying that I really hear what everyone's saying, and particularly what Daniela's just saying now about the word intervention. I think we can work with something around interaction or activity or something broader that doesn't imply a therapeutic orientation around the word intervention. That would be easily worked with, I think. And I also think that human-animal bond is not a useful term for what we train. The work that I do with our kangaroos, for example, and also with the horses, and certainly part of the complexity of the psychotherapy training that we offer, is that I'm not looking for, and our students and our practitioners are not looking for a response from the animal that means that they are necessarily bonded or that they're enjoying it or anything like that. Rather, we're learning from observing them. We're tracking their nervous system, their feelings, their behaviors, their approach, their consent. We're looking at how are they showing up as an psychotherapy, in the psychotherapy context. Are they a role model for beautiful teachings? Are they a co-regulator at this moment of the nervous system of the other? Are they a projective mechanism and tool, i.e. the client is projecting or transferring onto them? Are they offering safe touching or holding? Are they offering safe attachment, et cetera, et cetera? Are they actually an evocative cue and triggering feelings that can then be processed through the practitioner? There's a lot of different functions and ways that the animals show up in a consensual, healthy way where there's boundaries. So having trained animals or having animals that are required to feel a certain way does not work for the complexity of what we're including, because when you're observing or approaching, or the kangaroos are approaching, the horses are approaching, the cats are approaching, they may actually be wanting to play, and the client might find that intimidating, and there is not a bond right there. There's actually some feelings there that now we can work with, and some definite safety and some ethical issues and a whole lot of complex stuff that I won't get into from the psychotherapy lens. But the human-animal bond doesn't cut the mustard, and we have a lot of complexity that we teach at the Institute. And so animal-assisted therapy needs to be a term that we use where we specify animal-assisted psychotherapy. But I agree with what Daniela and everyone else is saying, that the broader umbrella needs to include what Laura's talking about, which is what we refer to either as animal-related services that aren't to do with an animal-assisted intervention, i.e. they don't have a goal or a qualified person. So, or if they do have a goal, and the goal is as simple as to support the aged person in the nursing home to feel a degree of, let's say, regulation in their nervous system or a degree of joy, then that is a goal. And that, why can't it be tracked and operationalized and reviewed and brought into it, and therefore would live quite nicely under my version of AAA, which is an animal-assisted activity, if their training was clear enough. And so I think there's lots of ways that we could either just sidestep the word intervention, or we could step up the rigor of the training of the practitioner that is offering the animal-assisted activity, so that they are very clear about their goal, and they're reviewing it and they're measuring it and they're tracking the outcome of their work. Or we could sidestep it by flipping the terminology with something like animal-assisted activities, animal-assisted interactions, that then include other stuff that you know, all the broader activities, but then specify the AAE, the AAC, the AATs, and all the AAT specificities that come off that, which is the occupational therapy, speech therapy, psychotherapy, all qualified through their state and their country. So I think it could easily be swapped, but that's something that we could all discuss.
This is Michael. just historically, there's a historical element. There was a time where animal-assisted activity was strongly proposed as the cover term for everything.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, it was the therapists who really rejected that. They were not comfortable with therapy being considered an activity. And at that point, it went away. For myself, I'm exactly where you're at, and I've been there for a long time, that everything's an activity and it would all fit under. But I guess my question to Amy and to the host group is, what is are we married to what's there?
You don't have to be married to anything. That's what the purpose of this group, what's going to make more sense. And I think a lot of it is some of you have brought up is like, how do we share it and not enforce in the legal way, but how do we get it out there if they're all AAI, everything's already there, and then now it's a big switch. So keeping it somewhat familiar, I guess, to people, but with just some maybe further clarification, deeper I can't say what I want to say, but just having more specifics within the definition. And it might make the definition a little longer, but I think if we're able to be very specific, so there's no way around it. Like, oh, I'm doing animal assisted therapy. Okay, and here's the 6 things in the definition, and you're not doing 2 of them, so it must be over here. Right. So the one I think that Laura brought up too, that I think becomes, maybe a little more problematic, is when you're using like what they would always call the diamond model. So if there's an interdisciplinary team, so you're the handler in what, you're participating in what the practitioner is doing as therapy, but you're not a therapist. So what do you say? It is an animal assisted therapy because there is a person, a clinician who is licensed, credentialed, or degree. They do have outcomes and measures. They do have, an animal that has been trained and evaluated to do this function. But what about the handler? Now, where do they stand? And I think that's where we get all murky. And then the second thing I wanted to bring up, Daniela, you talked about the journal articles, and I think that anybody here who, if you're doing reviews for journal articles, and I'm sure you get asked all the time as well, and making sure that there is, I have done the same thing, rejected or asked for revision, and like, you're saying this is an animal assisted therapy study, but nothing in here is animal assisted therapy, and they have to go back and rewrite it to reflect what it really is. And I think the more reviewers who are suited to do that, and especially if they have this nice, detailed definition, it helps to eliminate things from getting through into the literature that just isn't correct.
I think that's an excellent point. I've also been asked to review quite a few times, and I bring that point up, and the journal editors do take that very seriously.
Yeah, it is one place that when we're doing like, I anticipate we'll do like some dissemination, whether it's a full dissemination of all 4 groups, or we'll do 4 different disseminations. We are including things like publishing houses, units within universities, larger venues, so that it can trickle down. Does it make it down? I don't know. But the more places that we can. So as you are thinking about things like, where can we share this information that people are going to see it? Lay people too. Not everybody's looking at the literature to see what's out there. Sometimes people are just, oh, I'll just do this, and so-and-so's doing it, so now I'm going to do it. But how do we stop that from happening? Where can we go? So I know it's been an hour and a half. So do you feel like this has given you a good stopping place? Like we can work a little bit through Google? Is that?
I just want to throw one other thing, an idea out there that I'm not sure whether that comes under the, our group or the group of regulations. I don't know if we should have some joint meetings with some of the other groups. But in terms of agreement of the ideology, my association were very specific. I sent the copy of our bylaws, and it's very specific what you have to do, in Israel to become animal assisted therapy, what type of training, what you have to study. It would be interesting if there were different countries, and this is probably way too much to ask, but different psychotherapy groups in different countries could get together. I know that's come up in Ohio to try to do that, and come up with their own definitions and get some agreement about what that terminology means. I don't know if it's possible, if it's too way out there.
But I think it makes total sense, especially once we get like the broader, whatever that looks like, and then within the specific, we can have a longer list. Like, head up just for a second. Not that we have to use that, and that's probably a little bit dated too. But from the Aubrey Fine book, the umbrella, the animal assisted interventions, and then the activities, and then what those are, the therapy, then animal assisted psychotherapy, animal assisted social work, operating from there. But that can be detailed. And then you have even more specific, like individual agencies or schools are like, we call it this, we call it this. Well, you're allowed to if you want to call it that, but that's still your name. That's not the official name. That's your name, which is part of this, which is part of the larger. Does that make sense? So
it'd be interesting. I don't know if people looked at the graph that I made for Habri. It would be interesting to check over different countries. Have, let's say, people fill in that graph and see what they use for their countries and then try to come up with something general that would be something general with an ability to say, and in your country, this would fill in the same goals.
I can pull it up real quick.
Do I have one that's a graph in there? I mean,
well, that was the definitions. Okay, so
yeah. So for each. Maybe I didn't put oh, there it is. I saw it.
Is it still the same, or do I need to reshare?
Yeah, that, and then the other document I put, said, okay, now you have to fill in what are the goals of that particular intervention or activity or whatever, and what type of training do you need for that particular intervention, and what's the role of the animal, and what type of training that animal may or may not be for that. It'd be interesting to have different countries try to fill that out.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. Can you put up the other one that I had?
Is it another?
You put it up for just a second.
Was it the white paper or the?
I think the white paper.
So I was looking at the Habri flow chart also. I looked at all the documents, and kind of what I did was I kind of edited what I view or perceive as being maybe different than what was written. And I wonder if that isn't a starting point for us all to pick one that might be fairly common, maybe this Habri flow chart, and then kind of identify what is there within that or within one of these other documents or charts that we might prefer to be different.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of a starting point, because a lot of it's there. I feel like it's just kind of a matter of tweaking it. For example,
but if you could add, for instance, when you do that, you add, okay, if you look in the first paragraph, what I've written, each one fills out what's the goal of that particular intervention, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
What level type of training that the person needs. What's the setting? The manner is carried out, the type and degree of training the animal may or may not need. And then to fill all that out and see where we might be able to come with some sort of agreement, and that something that will fit.
Right. And I think what else we have to consider is like because we had a lot of talk about the keeping things simple and basic, and what needs to go in the definition and what is part of the continuing education. Like what they can be a little more specific there. But there has to be something like the definition, because that's what people are going to look at. It all started back when I did the original white paper. Right now everyone cites that as definitions. So out there that becomes repeated, then it starts to settle in a little more. So we can.
So is there maybe this document and the HABRI flow chart that we can use kind of as a foundation that we pick apart a little bit and talk about changes we might suggest?
Oh, sorry. What if I do this? If I take like the definitions that are out there between the HABRI, the one that we worked on with Ohio, the one I think that we had one in there too.
Mhm.
There's
another one down there, Amy. You've just about got it. Oh, the green chimney one has some more detail. Again, when I look at it, I see things that I might think are in one area versus another, but there's some good categorization there and examples.
Yeah.
But if we had kind of a starting point and then said, I don't know that animal assisted psychotherapy should be in under the same term as animal assisted occupational, physical, or speech therapy, for example. That's one of the things that I'm kind of wrestling with as an maybe sorting that out. I know, maybe that's kind of a category of its own, a heading of, but anyway, taking something that's pretty much like we'd like it to be and then tweaking it versus restarting something.
Can I just also, I know I can see my chart there as you're scrolling down, Amy, wondering if you could just put on the animal related services chart, PDF one, not the word because it doesn't come out. But that's what I put together and train at the Institute. I'm wondering whether the word interventions could be replaced by interactions or something that we work with, because pretty much everything else to me looks very neat. I mean, I don't know if that feels very neat for anyone else because I'm in my little bubble here in Australia doing what I do. But I'm not so unclear that, for example, and I've lost everybody's box because it's gone to the side, but I think it was not Laura, it was somebody else that was talking about, oh, let me scroll down, the visitation dogs, and yeah, the other Laura Ackerman. I mean, for me, it feels like it fits in AAA. It just depends. But I think a broader term like animal related services helps us have a very wide umbrella that helps everybody feel included, be included, but they're not necessarily animal assisted, whatever we come to, where there's a facilitated process. There's a practitioner or a practitioner animal team, one or the other, that's trained, that is doing a particular activity or education, coaching, or therapeutic intervention, and the rest of it. So that's, I don't know, I just want to throw that in there. That's how I've been constructing it, just to allow people to have a place. And I am totally open to whatever everyone else is processing, but I just wanted to throw that in there in terms of how I've included everybody without confusing animal assisted practice.
I have a question, Amy. So there's another group that's working on the terminology for the animals themselves. Is that true, for therapy? Yes. Animal terminology? So yes. At some point, are we going to check in with them and see, because yes. It would seem that the two things are so related. We don't want to use terminology that doesn't match with what they're proposing for the animals.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why we had to meet so quickly, because we're meeting back with that group March 1st. So like, we're going back to the full group. Here's what we talked about. Here are our things. So every step of the way that we're trying to stay in alignment for that exact reason.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And then, do you think it would be, trying to think of the easiest way to put the next steps together, whether it be like each of us can kind of break into smaller groups and tackle one area? Do we want to work on it all together through one document that's kind of already there? What's your preferred way of working? don't have a preference?
I think smaller groups are nice, but I don't feel like we're at the point where we can do that.
So what is the next step that we're trying to accomplish? And then we can figure out the best way to do that. Can you reiterate what the next step is?
Yeah, the next step is we're looking at what's in existence. So like the definitions that are already out there, and finding what do we like, what do we not like, what's missing, what needs to be filled in, how do we make them more appropriate. The different countries, we'll be able to address the different countries. Because I know that's one of the questions a lot of people have is how do you make it global? What is in the US is not necessarily the same in Europe or the same in other parts of the world. So I think we'll be able to navigate that. But if we can just first kind of figure out based on where you are, here's what is important. Here are the things that need to be addressed. And then how do we make it more applicable globally? Does that fit?
So do we need someone who actually correlates all of that into one document? Maybe people from different countries provide input to that and someone correlates it all so we can all look at it as a whole, right?
Yes. Yep. So
would it be beneficial to start with a document where we each maybe list very, not explaining rationale, but can we consider this term? Instead of AAI, can we consider, animal related services or human animal connection or for bond or, maybe is that a starting point?
It could be, yeah.
I'm wondering, like Laura's just said, I'm wondering whether, because there's a few charts, right? So Nancy's got hers. There's a couple of us that have presented our little chart with the terminology that makes sense in our country, in our context. I wonder if everyone did something similar, we could actually have something to look at and then be able to compare and draw, and somebody could coordinate coordinate the whole piece so that everybody's piece could be looked at and we could start to explore and get curious about the terminology and the work.
It'd be interesting to do some sort of questionnaire for everyone to fill out and then see exactly, what's going on in your country and how do you feel about this and how would you feel, something that could be filled out, and then we can start looking for some similarities. Somebody here just put up that, in their country, social work is not considered to be therapy. But there might be an overriding term. That's, why I say psychotherapy, because they're from different fields, do psychotherapy from different types of training. And that it might be separate from animal assisted social work, which is going to visit someone who's closed up in their home. That, and that's their way of being able to come into the house and be welcome to the house. And otherwise they would, try to keep the social worker out, for instance. But some term, like, that's why I like the term psychotherapy, because there might be a social worker who's also studied psychotherapy, but try to look from some terms that will go across the very countries. It's complicated, but maybe some sort of survey that could start working on it.
I'm just wondering whether, and I'm not sure how this fits Nancy and everyone, but a lot of people are visual, and I think it's really useful. I'm a little worried about going back with questionnaires that we might just gather more data and more information, and it might kind of escalate rather than start to sort of target. So that's why I was kind of wondering if everyone could do some version of a chart with the terminology that fits their country.
Yeah.
Then we can actually, because there's only, 10, 20 of us, we could actually visit each one coordinated through the chair, and actually discuss and have the person speak about their chart, their terminology, their country, their practice, And then we get a sense of being able to sharpen it up a bit quickly rather than go back to the word and the you know, yeah, it might be a bit more visual and speed things along a little bit.
Sure.
Also, we had to document the 33 pages paper, Common Terminology in Animal-Assisted Interventions, where the authors very nicely listed the existing definitions. I mean, all this work has been done. Could we maybe just go over those, maybe add to those if we have better definitions or have found other definitions, or from your own countries, see if you could fit them in this table with, it says category, common definitions, provider, program examples, provider qualifications. So can we start from these tables that are already here in the document?
Why don't you add your table to the groups of documents already there?
Yeah, so, okay, so here's one more question. Would you rather, you can do this as homework and then meet again in a month? I know I said we only had to meet 3 times throughout the year, but if you like the idea of meeting together again, maybe on another Saturday, and then, yeah, do exactly that. So everybody kind of puts together their thing and you get 5 minutes to present on what you found, and then we can kind of take like, yeah, we like this, yeah, been there, or here's why that doesn't work, and then we can just do a quick roundtable. And so, I mean, if there's 20 total, I doubt we'll ever have all 20, but it'll at least be like, you know, a 2-hour block. Does that seem feasible?
Makes sense.
Yep. Okay, so we can do it that way. So you can choose if you're a visual person, like, you know, Meg, I'm the same way. You can do it in a visual format. Or if you're a words person and you want to hear, this is what I found and I like these definitions, you can present that as well. Because we can move things around, and we're going to need both anyway. We're going to need narrative and we're going to need visual.
Right.
You get to choose.
Right.
Yeah, you can choose whether you want to do narrative or visual. And then what, like a month from now, sometime in March, what works for everyone? Or should I just send out a doodle poll? I want to make sure like I'm honoring time zones too, because I sacrificed getting up super early or staying up super late. So I want to make sure we don't have to do that again. Or at least take turns who stays up late or gets up early. So if I say a month being,
I'm open to meeting sooner rather than later to get at least to a point where we're teasing out terminology and definitions a little more.
okay. So
I feel like this next meeting is really critical to get some movement, you know,
okay,
within
Beck,
the
could you
group.
sooner like is 2 weeks too soon for everyone to get this done? I mean, I don't know what other projects on your
Right.
plate.
Mhm.
Do we have, okay, so let's do show of hands for like, I'll even say 3 weeks. Show of
3
hands.
weeks.
Okay, so 4, 5, 6, okay, so almost, and then 4 weeks. Anybody for 4 weeks?
That's consensus.
Okay, so this is 3 weeks. So 3
Nice.
weeks out would be, let's see, so it's a little 1, 2, 3 weeks would be March 12th. Is that,
Mhm.
We got to stick with Saturdays.
unless you have go ahead, unless you're.
Sorry, I'm away on the 12th, but that's fine. It doesn't, that's okay.
I'm sure.
I could be at the other meeting, and I could send you by email anything that I've done.
Okay, super.
Yeah, I'll be out of town on the 12th as well, but I can contribute in advance to whatever we develop.
Okay, I mean, would we rather go into the next week, or is that still okay for everyone else?
You're sticking with the Saturday?
Well, I think it's the only one that, I mean, I know it's a big deal, but
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
during the week, it's super hard for.
Wondering. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and then Alish, you had something? You're muted though. Oops, I see your hand raised there. Yep, we're still muted.
I think he just asked what was decided for next meeting. Could somebody please write it in the chat? so that then he can be clearer about the task.
Did you read lips?
Really?
Or did you, is that in the chat that I didn't see?
That's in the chat.
Oh, I thought it was like,
What did I
oh my
see?
God, that's a skill.
Oh, I see.
Yes, and I'm going to also provide like the minutes or the notes from today. So like everything will be in here as well. That'll have like the next meeting date. It'll have the time. It'll have the link to the Zoom. Everything will be right in there. So I'll email that to everyone.
Okay, but so we're waiting the 12th or the 19th? In the
I'm
end?
wondering whether if we just take it a week either side and we can include Daniela and Laura. Would
Yeah.
that work, or does that exclude others?
I'm okay on the 19th if that's not too long to wait, but I also don't want you all to change your schedule for me.
Yeah. So does anybody else care about the 19th? All right. All right. So we'll say the
Thank you.
19th, and then timing is going to be really. So I know this time is early for a lot of people. So I don't know how to, like, I'm trying to think, I'm like, I know Doodle, but then Doodle will navigate your time zone. So maybe if I just send out times in a Doodle that I can somehow figure out.
I think for Debbie, it's almost 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
I think
2
this time
hours.
is okay for me. Yeah. So no worry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I know, yeah, Meg's, it's whatever, 5 o'clock in the morning for you.
Like it's
Super
5
early.
a.m.
No, I'm later than you, Debbie. So, I mean, even if we added an hour, it would make it really reasonable for me, because it would take it to 6 instead of 5. But it just depends what it does to everyone else, because to Debbie, it takes it to 3. That might be worse. I don't know.
That's fine. We take this time you at 5 a.m. Next time me 3 a.m. It's okay. Fair enough.
Oh no, I don't think it's fair.
Nancy, like midnight, right? Nancy, does that put you at like midnight?
I'm fine. Yeah, it's evening for me.
All right, so if we went 1 hour later, so that would be starting at 2 Eastern time, and then everybody else's. So what time zones do we have? So 2, well, it's 1 hour later than you started today. So does that cause a problem for anyone?
Yep.
Okay, all right, so then I'll take this up and get it out to you today or tomorrow. And then just in the meantime, just create your own visual graphic of definitions, or thank you, Brazil. Or you can do, like I said, a narrative. You can take the definitions that are already out there that you find, which regardless of where they are, and then just kind of add your own, like, I like this stuff, but I cross off this and I'd add this. And then we'll do the 5-minute presentation per person and see what we come up with. And then we'll have a discussion time. Okay, awesome. That feels really productive. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, and good day or evening or night or morning or something. Debbie, go to sleep.
Nice meeting everyone.
Bye-bye,
See you next
everybody.
week.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good.